Lauren, as has been my terrible practice, I didn't open the agenda beforehand. I will remember sometime. I made it on time, so I'm feeling that that's like pretty excellent. But I think our first item is usually, do we have any members of the public who would like to speak?
No one has their hand raised.
All right. Do we have any comments on the prior minutes?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes.
Second.
Excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, Joan, for putting. Joan noticed that her internet's a little spotty, so we'll have virtual Joan. All right, so we've done one thing. Do you want to just pick up where we left off, Lauren, for where we are?
Let me just share my screen and we can start where we were before.
Noreen, you should count up. Like, I wonder, that's probably like what, your 20,000th minute motion? You know, like like the number. Every so often I try and add up those things, and it's, you know,
You know, when you're goal oriented, it's one of the few things you can do. You feel you got something done.
It's like the make your bed first thing in the morning, you know.
Okay. So what I did, and I think, I can't remember now if I sent this over to you guys. I started at the beginning, and if it's in green, that means that we talked about it last time and we made a change or made a decision on it. So the things that we did not make decisions on were the Article 2. We said that we needed more discussion on the form of government, legislative branch clarification, and that this is where we would put a change of government if it was going to happen. And then we talked about changing that threshold for members at a town meeting. Tentatively, it's changed to 150. I just took some notes on everyone's thoughts last week, but this is another area that I think probably you'll come back to. So then we went to publication of the town meeting, and we changed that language to allow for the 5 days, which is in the state. And then you guys talked about the moderator of town meetings, and I'm working with Nancy to craft some language that would accomplish that goal of having a moderator pool. So as soon as we have that, we can review that. I would imagine reviewing this at your next meeting. So if we pick up where we left off, it's at annual town meeting, types of town meetings, and then the first one being the annual town meeting.
So if I recall correctly, so first of all, Lauren, by the way, I don't want to let the moment pass with yet again telling you thank you, because I think the way you've organized this has been just terrific. So am I correct that Ira asked why we do this meeting?
This is not the one. It's the annual budget reconciliation meeting. That's the next item. That's the one that Ira asked. Why are we doing that? Why is it in the agenda? So the annual town meeting is state driven. We're supposed to have an annual town meeting where we talk about the 5-year plan and then officially receive all of the annual reports from all the boards and commissions that I then format and bind into a permanent copy. So this one I think would have to stay in the annual town meeting. But the current issue with it is that it's so prescriptive that it has to be held at 7:30 p.m. And that's no longer a time that we kind of use for town meetings. We hold them between 6 and 7, depending on availability.
And
so,
exactly why would you do that anyway? I mean, there's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in other areas of the charter, we do say something has to be held in the evening. So I think the suggestion from staff was just take out at 7:30 p.m. and just say it must be held in the evening.
Right. Other thoughts? And the 45 days, is that from the statute?
Yes.
So anyone else have a question of this? You've highlighted the Board of Selectmen shall designate which are to be read. Is that I'm unfamiliar with this part. Is that statutory as well? I don't recall that we actually read the report.
We never do.
Yeah.
And if we're being honest, we don't normally have all of those annual reports by this annual meeting anyways. So we do have to just do, we answer questions if they relate to boards and commissions, and then we allow chairs of boards and commissions to speak if they'd like to at the town meeting. But I've never seen anyone actually get up and give their annual report.
It's a shame because that could be a great moment for a three-cornered hat and a town crier look. It'd be lovely.
Yeah.
So Lauren, what is the statute? I mean, what do we actually have to do?
We just have to hold an annual town meeting. And it has to be no later than 45 days from the start of the calendar year. That's it.
And the annual town meeting is not a defined term?
I don't think so. I'll go back. Let me make myself a note over here on this doc and just verify.
Joe, it always was sort of the state of the town meeting. So I assume, whatever they encompasses the state of the town report, I would think we should leave that in if we're going to keep this meeting. And the 5-year capital plan, all these other reports, I don't remember ever making a decision on what was chosen, what was read. I don't ever remember that happening.
Yeah, neither do I. But I'm wondering if it shouldn't say there'll be an annual town meeting where the selectmen shall present the state of the town, and maybe picking up on what Lauren said, and offer the opportunity for any board and commission to report. Like,
and leave out any 5. Isn't there something with the 5-year capital plan that we're required to do, or am I just thinking of this charter?
So I got into a robust discussion with the great Fillmore McPherson once, where he tried to tell me the capital improvement plan was a 5-year plan because it said 5 years, and hence by charter it was the Board of Selectmen's. And I encouraged him to present his 5-year plan, but the Board of Finance would be happy with theirs. So I think it's a little bit imprecise. If it's not, my feeling is I think it's a wonderful practice. I just don't know that it needs to be, charterized. Lauren, were you able to look?
I think having an annual meeting or opportunity, regardless of what you call it, a town meeting or public hearing, to discuss the state of the town.
Yeah.
Provide an opportunity for people to air their thoughts, advice, grievances, whatever.
We should hold it on Festivus. But yeah, I agree. So I think I'm looking at it, Lauren, is it just controlled by 7.1, do you think?
I think so. Yeah, that's
Except as otherwise provided by law, there shall be held in each town annually a town meeting for the transaction of business proper to come before such meeting, which meeting shall be designated the annual town meeting. And it should be convened by the selectmen, deem if necessary, and they shall warn a special town meeting. I love that. An application of 20 inhabitants qualified to vote, such meeting to be held. It says, it doesn't say anything. It says we have to hold it in a room that's big enough. That's it.
It doesn't even have the 45 days. So I'm not sure exactly why we would put a mandate on us for 45 days. But
yeah. If we could designate this one, I mean, I'd like to get your sense, guys, but my feeling.
Joan has her hand up.
Oh, go ahead, Joan. I'm sorry. I didn't see you there.
That's okay. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
Go ahead, please.
Oh, good. Okay. So I've lost some visual. I may be getting some internet back. That's the question I put out there is if since our fiscal year is July to June, could we do it 45 days from the fiscal year? Because to me, you're halfway through a fiscal year, you're talking about a prior year, and you're already in the middle of another fiscal year. So to me, I think you just say we need to have an annual town meeting to be determined by the Board of Selectmen, is my thought.
I think that's a really good point.
you know what? I'm just thinking, although I do agree that that is a good point, I think the reason we probably do it calendar year is because the audited financial statements for the prior fiscal year are not available until December or January. So the state of the town goes over all of the financials from the year prior, and we don't get those back from the auditor. We don't do the CAFR until the fall, and then we have the final report usually for the Board of Finance meeting in December.
It also probably makes sense, Lauren, because of the beginning of the budget process, as cumbersome as it is.
Yeah.
but I don't know why that has to, a little bit to Joan's point, like that may be a good idea. I just don't know why we have to say it. So if we don't have to say 45 days, heaven forbid we have a snowstorm, I mean, like a lot
Yeah.
of weird things happen.
No, and I do think the snow has been an issue for us in the past where we probably were eking it close to 45 days.
Yeah.
Right. And who knows, maybe future boards of selectmen would want to do it prior to the budget referendum and have a big meeting prior to the budget referendum to say, okay, this is what happened last year. This is what we're planning on this year. And this is why the budget is here. Just a thought.
So my, and I apologize, the 3 golden doodles are barking away. If that's all right with you guys, my thought would be to send this back, Lauren, if you don't mind seeing if there's something else to it, and make this minimalist. Is that the sense of the group?
Yeah, I would agree with that, Joe.
Okay. Minimalist we shall be.
I think as long as we're clear that you have to hold this once a year.
Yeah, and I would probably include the language, Noreen, like you were saying, and provide a state of the town. You know what I mean? Like, it does seem to me that should, while that
Yeah.
is beyond the statute, that should be the point, right? You stand up in front of everybody and say, we're in debt, we're doing well,
Right.
we're gonna, it's a chance also for the political party to say, and we're gonna need new fire trucks, like that's a useful thing.
Well, I think
Yep.
both points are well taken. And Joan's point about, end of a fiscal year makes a lot of sense. But what Lauren's talking about after an audit, you're going to be getting recommendations. There's, reports that are confirmed. I don't know. I know Lauren's going to look into it, but I'm on the fence on where that should be. But just as long as we clarify that they have to have it.
Yeah.
I think once a year, state of the town address, and then leave it for the timing as to when is the best time to do it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a good.
Yeah,
Okay.
that seems just right. Because, frankly, maybe you should have it on the 4th of July. It wouldn't be the worst idea ever.
It would be the worst idea ever.
Yeah, because
Close.
finish up the parade and hold it on the green. Your attendance would be huge. Actually, that's a really good idea.
So it's really not, Joe. It's really not.
Yeah,
No,
sure.
Joe.
I'm kidding.
No,
I'm kidding.
I like that. one.
No.
All right, so we will go minimalist, but the idea of a state of the town.
Okay.
Unless you find out a really good reason why we can't.
All right.
Where to?
So now we get to that annual budget reconciliation town meeting. And this is the one that Ira questioned whether it was necessary.
I don't think it needs to be a meeting. I mean, it needs to be a meeting of the Board of Finance, but a town meeting, nobody goes to.
The one question I would have is there anything that we've done in the past with our bonding that implies that we're doing it? Is there any, it's probably a Stacy question. Is there
Yeah.
anybody who cares? Because that isn't us, because from the standpoint of the Board of Finance, I mean, this meeting, this is pretty trivial. So, I mean, there are occasions where it's not. You guys have remembered legal fees and snow plowing fees that have gone up, but it's not like there's a whole lot of choice usually.
No, and I mean, in my tenure here, we've used this meeting as like the end of the year approval of all special appropriations that are coming in at the end of the year. Once everyone realizes what's in their accounts for the end of the year and whether or not they can line item transfer to cover deficits. If they have to bring a special appropriation forward in May or June, we then move it to the annual budget reconciliation town meeting. But that's been the only items on the agenda, on the call of the meeting since I've been here.
Right, and we can still hold that. It's
And-
just
and
we're not
we-
putting
yeah.
a charter.
We just would hold it as a special town meeting versus this annual budget reconciliation town meeting. So we'd have to hold it no matter what. We would just call it something else. That's all.
Okay, that sounds swell.
Yep, so
I will just confirm with Stacy that nothing is obligating us to keep this exact language in the charter. And if not, we will strike it out.
Excellent. Look at us, we're cutting out language left and right. We'll be having charter flashcards by the time we're done.
So special town meeting. comments here were the reference to the annual budget adoption is probably unnecessary, and reference to the budget appropriations may also be redundant.
Yeah, we get to do that whether this says it or not.
Yeah, so, I mean, this would kind of just be,
Is everyone all right with removing the yellow language?
Yeah, I do. Again, it's spoken to elsewhere, and just to keep this minimal.
Okay.
Agree with Matt.
And we have lots of yellow and red for petition town meeting.
yes.
So I have a question, and for Lauren or Noreen or Joan. I only remember one of these in my time, and that had to do with, I think, was around the time for the decision to should the Planning and Zoning Commission be elected or appointed. Are there others? Anyone, do you remember any of these?
I've never experienced a petition town meeting.
I
so-
have not either. So
And I could,
You know,
I could. Go ahead.
I'm wondering if, this is going to show my age. I was at a town meeting when we decided to buy the Hammonasset School property. And believe it or not, I don't believe that it ended there. We voted for it. I don't believe it even went to referendum, but I could be wrong on that. But, and I think that was for this case that this opportunity came up for a large purchase. And so I would think that would be one. I don't know what year that was.
That would have
Early
been,
90s.
that
early
probably would have
90s.
been Tom Rylander. I mean, he would have initiated it, I would have assumed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think you're right. It was Tom.
Yeah. So I remember there had been a move to consider whether or not we would have an elected versus an appointed Planning and Zoning Commission, and that went up on petition, and I assume it went to a petition town meeting that was then put to referendum. I don't recall it perfectly, but that's the only thing like that I remember.
I remember that happening too, Joe. Matter of fact, I was talking about it the other day. I remember we had the discussion. So we've never had an elected P and Z. Is that correct?
That's right.
We
Not that
talked
I
about it,
recall.
but we didn't do it. Okay, that's what I was curious. Okay. Yeah, I do remember that. And actually it was because of an incident with the potential biotech over on Cops Road, as I recall.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly the incident, the precipitating event, but I do. I was very new then. As a matter of fact, Noreen, just so you do a little bit of indulgence, that's when we met. I didn't understand the issue, and I ran into. I was getting gas at Cumberland Farms like at 11 o'clock one night after a meeting. That was the thing.
And that was my luck. That was my lucky day. Wow.
Yeah, I know you didn't even pay for the gas, for me. So what is it that we're to consider under this section? So everyone
So-
understand the structure. You don't like what the Board of Selectmen's doing. They're not listening to you. You can collect signatures and create a town meeting as a citizen.
Yeah. So some of the changes are just more cleanup, like you'll see in the actual bullet points, just kind of getting out some of the legalese that maybe doesn't need to be there. Striking out references to specific sections of the general statutes in case they change. But one of the other suggestions from Ira when he met with you guys was to make all of the thresholds consistent for petitioned meetings. So, in other parts of the charter, I believe it's 1,200 signatures, and that would trigger some petition to town meeting. So he just said, make it all consistent. Pick one number and create one kind of petition system that would trigger an action by the town.
Do you have any idea what other towns are doing here with this? With the 500, 1,200, quite a difference.
Yeah,
It's a good question.
I am not sure. I can definitely look that up though.
And Lauren, do we know how often that happens? Like
That
in a
we
year?
I've been here almost 7 years. I've never seen it happen.
Remember the one, Liz.
I think yeah,
Lauren, where else are we calling for 1,200? I don't have my, I only have you up on the screen. I don't have my other copy.
Here we go, right
So,
there.
all town meeting actions. So this is to petition, any petition rejected at town meeting held less than 6 months prior shall include 1,200 signatures of voters. What is this for?
What even is that?
Petition for a referendum to reconsider. So if we have a town action and let's say we take buying a building to town meeting and it fails, and then people think it failed because only certain people were allowed the opportunity to vote, they can take it back to a town meeting. And this requires 1,200 signatures.
Well, that kind of makes sense. Otherwise, the same 500 people could just make you keep voting over and over again.
Yeah.
I believe that 1,200 signature thing happened with the new Stop and Shop when they wanted to build it. The first vote went down and a group in town got together and got a petition. They felt not enough correct information was out. And I believe that's the last time I remember that happening.
I mean, it makes sense to me that this is a bigger number. You
Just
know,
make
if
sure
you
we
if you
have-
if we've already had political process, so I don't know that I agree with Ira about the idea of making it the same.
Right.
Because this one, you're reconsidering a vote that's been taken already.
Right. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you know, you and 499 of your friends can just continue to wreak havoc if you want.
Yeah. And in both instances, the 1,200 is a reconsideration of action at a town meeting. So I agree.
I
That it
don't know
probably
that
should be more.
I don't know that 500 feels like a problem. If you've taken the time and gotten 500, and it's 500 voters that have to be verified,
Yes.
gotten 500 signatures, I sort of feel like the town should listen to you and have a town meeting. That doesn't strike me as, that's not like 50 people. You know, what do you guys think? I mean, there's no magic to it. Could it be, I suppose it could be 1,000 or 750, but I don't know. It doesn't happen a lot, and I don't know it's a problem to solve. Anyone else have a sense of this?
I have to agree with you, Joe. I think the 500 to just get a petition meeting for something, but to overturn should be a bigger hurdle.
Yeah.
I would agree
Yeah.
as well too. I mean, just have the town meeting. I think that's fine. That would be a good number. You know, 1,200, I think, is roughly 5 to 6% of the town's citizenship. So I think that's necessary for, trying to go back on a decision. But 500 would be good for here.
I think if I'm a selectman and 500 people want to come and talk about something, I should be listening to them anyway. You know, so that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I agree.
So
Yeah,
is
I think sometimes having these things in the charter, the point isn't that it's going to be used a lot. It's that our elected officials know that it's there. And you better listen. Doesn't mean you're going to agree, but at least you will talk about it and listen and talk about it with respect. So I think, having something, my measure of whether to do this or not is not how often it's used. You can make a strong case for having it on the books, even though it's never used. It can still be important.
Yeah, and I think there's also something why does, I think Ira's message was people really like town meetings even though they never go. I think the idea that you can with 500 people, engage the government is a strong statement of the structure of what we're doing.
Yeah, I agree with that. No, I just think showing the people that they do have a voice, I think is important.
I agree with you.
I would add that.
Go ahead, Robert.
No, just simply that, I'm in favor, but my understanding of the research in a lot of states which have these things and made it easier, the thought that is, quote, the voice of the people, if you look at who's gotten the petition signature, it's in some cases, it's the tobacco companies, for example, it's, quote, special interests. Although I'm the first to argue that a group that's proposing something I disagree with is a special interest. If you agree with me, you're a concerned citizen group. So, to be honest, but still, okay, I've made my point and I'll shut up.
Yeah, I just want to add, I think Robert's onto something, because I think why this is in there is not for the selectmen or the town government, it's really for the people. So if they have something they're very concerned about, they go to our charter and see exactly what they have to do.
Yeah. So the rest of this section, if I look through your comments, Lauren, looks to me like blocking and tackling. Is that right?
Yeah,
And the only thing I think on item D, the town clerk shall within 5, 10, calendar days after receipt determine whether the petition received are sufficient as required by law. Should we make that 10 business days so she has 2 weeks?
I think that would be, the most convenient thing for her, because this is very restrictive if we were to get a petition come in.
So my one experience, if I'm remembering it correctly, was that it really did take some time.
Yeah,
To verify who was there, and not every signature was clear.
yes, exactly. So they have to make phone calls and try to and if you get down to you can verify 498 signatures, but not the other 7. I mean, then that, the petition can either pass or not. So if we
Yeah.
do 10 business days, I think that would give her a decent enough leeway for time to verify all those signatures.
I guess I would add that since you're talking to Nancy anyway, maybe if she recalls the any prior thing, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to 15 business days.
Okay.
I for me, it really shouldn't be much longer than that, but something like that.
And we probably should look at the 1,200 and how many business days that's needed.
Yeah.
Can I just add one thing? When you brought up to 15 days, I think we should talk to Stacy about this, because this petition could have some signs of time-sensitive issues or something. 15 sounds like a lot. I think we should give her as much as she needs, but more. Anyway, I talk to Stacy, see what she says. But 15 sound like a lot.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what could it. I guess the purchase of town land. Like the example you gave. Usually that takes a while, but you never know. Does that give you, as a board of selectmen, the ability to say, fine, have everything ready, we're going to go sign? I guess.
So we want to talk to both Nancy versus business days and Stacy versus any kind of finance impact. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think at least giving 2 full business weeks, I think, is the least we can do. Because remember, these are ink signatures. Let's see.
Do we need the Board of Selectmen may refer the petition to the town attorney for review and comments? I mean, can't.
I'm
not
I think
opposed, but can't they do that without asking, finding it in the charter?
I'll tell you, for one reason I would allow that is that on the off chance that the actual thing that's being petitioned has to do with legal bills, then you'd like to make it clear that when you do this, they have authority to go into it.
Okay.
And it's the type of thing where it comes up so rarely. It's the first thing any future board's ever going to do.
So just looking at the notes for
For
G.
G, yeah.
So the 150 affirmative votes. Let me just mute myself for a second.
Yeah.
Oh, and the other potential change, if we want to think about it, is maybe rather than a hard number, a percentage of the voters. Just a thought.
Well, is there anything, I mean, we're still going at this from the mindset of a physical vote with people there. Is there anything that we should be considering at this point if we allow for online participation? Does it affect? I don't think it does, but does it affect anything here in G? Less than 150 affirmative votes cast when, right? I guess it'd be cast during the meeting. I'm just trying to think. I want to make sure
Right.
there's nothing.
No, I'm going back to the number of people and then, so this has to be a physical piece of paper as well. This is not online petition, correct? We're not allowing for that. And we want to make 500 and 1,200 versus 0.5% to 1% type of thing. Just a thought.
The item petition shall be the first item on call of the meeting, and affirmative action on the petition item shall require a majority, but no less than 150 votes. Oh, so I guess the mechanic is you can get 500 people to sign on, but if only 200 people show up, you then can't turn it. You have to have twice the quorum. I actually don't have a problem with that. Anyone object?
So I think the staff suggestion about this 150 wasn't so much that that should be the number needed, but that does it have to be, actually, no, it's actually the opposite of what I'm thinking in my head. So they're saying, do we have to put a number of votes in, or can we just say that it requires a majority? But Joe, I think I agree with you that, making it actually hit a certain number of affirmative votes, if they bothered to bring it to petition, it's probably a good thing.
Yeah, otherwise we're down to our well, in theory, all we need are 75 people. So then you could do a major, you get 500 signature, but 36 people, 40 people could come and change the vote, and that's too small.
Mhm.
So I actually think this is okay.
All right. So then the only other suggestion here is just striking the language at the end that says, provided that the item petition meets proper legal subject for a town meeting. By the time it gets to a town meeting, it's already been verified, so we don't really need to say again.
Well, but what's the
there.
mechanic? So where in the charter process? So let's assume for a second, I get 500 people to sign up to say, yeah, we're going to open a fracking well in the middle of Stop and Shop. That's our thing. We're going to open it right up there in the produce counter. That's improper for a town meeting. It's private property. There's about a million reasons why that's wrong. Where does that get bumped in this section? Aside from there, I mean, so far all we've done is send it to review.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what section it's in.
Because I'm kind of thinking we should leave it. Because if you think about it, this is really, I think, Bob, I'm borrowing one of your points. People use this for communication, so they should know someone's going to say it's not going to go up there if it's not proper subject matter.
Isn't it in the very first section that the petition shall conform to requirements of section 7.9 of the general statutes as amended?
So
Super 1.4.4a.
That we took out.
Yeah.
Well, we just took out specifically to section
Oh,
7-9.
the general
Or
statutes. Yep.
keeping of,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know
Okay.
that the general statutes. I mean, I don't know. I don't know that you couldn't craft a conforming town meeting that's procedurally correct but subject matter improper. I just don't know enough about it.
Well, let's see. So we're saying proposed ordinance in the very first paragraph here. It's not numbered. Proposed ordinances, propose repeal or modification of existing ordinances, and propose other valid town meetings. So what constitutes a valid town meeting? I think you're right. That should be added in here. Then you don't have to worry about it making sure that it's valid at that time.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So you could do valid town meeting that conforms to the general statute and includes subject matter appropriate for a town meeting. Like, we could just define it right there.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, that works.
I'm not a lawyer, but I play one on my company. Sorry.
We all play one here in the Charter Review Commission. It's never too late, guys. Remember, you can always come to law school. I'll be happy to email the admissions links to you.
So do you want to add language up here after the first paragraph, item 3, or do you?
Yeah, I think if we're, Joan, tell me if I got your point right, but I think if we're defining a town meeting, we should also make it clear and the subject matter is appropriate for a town meeting. You know, if we're going to work on fleshing that definition, let's just make it all clear there.
Yeah.
Then you don't need it down below.
All right.
I just don't, the only thing I'm sensitive to is I'm guessing that there was another group that did this once upon a time, and they probably had the same worry. All right, you're fine by the general statutes, but the topic doesn't make sense. You know, we want to have a town meeting to vote to buy Guilford. Yeah. Bob, you can head the militia.
I'd vote for that.
And I think item H we took care of.
I think so too. I think they're good.
All right, so fun. We've completed sections 1 and 2, which are some of the very thorniest. And we are in section 3.
Section 3.
I take it back. The annual budget referendums here. Whoops.
So section 3.1, just one minor change to strike the language that reverts back to the definitions in the preamble of the charter, because I mean, I don't know, we could go either way with this one.
So the one thing is, notice the default position, and my instinct is just to leave it for the moment, but except where otherwise specified, all elected officials shall be elected biennially every 2 years at the regular town election. So to the extent we're talking about extending terms, we would do that specially, but the default stays for 2 years.
Yeah. And then the other thing is, and I don't have a note here, so that's shame on me, this idea that all elective terms of office shall commence on the Monday following the election. That is something that you might want to consider revising.
We should completely consider changing that.
So I think go to the first week of December to allow for that month of transition that people were talking.
Yeah. The beginning the first Monday in December instead of October.
I hate to ask, what number are we on? I'm not.
November.
My page is not moving.
Oh, we're at 3.1 on page 8.
Yeah. Okay, no, I've got it. I'm sorry, I do have it.
Yeah, so Noreen, that was, so now for elected officials, they would take over the first Monday in December.
Yeah, that makes so much more sense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of elected positions, you know, I suppose it doesn't matter that much. You're on the, from the Board of Finance standpoint, does that make sense though? You know, one downside is you're now taking over 3 weeks later during the budget cycle.
Well, this conversation started because of the situation with the new first selectman. So
Right.
maybe we're looking at this too broadly. Maybe that's the position that really you could see what could cause problems for anyone coming in.
Yeah, I mean,
But
go ahead.
I just think that it makes, you know, you to just have one person not be part of it, and then you've got a mix of old and new. I think we should just kind of go, okay, this is the start in December. And let's face it, the budget process is well underway. In another month, I don't think, you know, I think there's only one, maybe 2 meetings of the Board of Finance that
There are none before
There are none.
December. So actually, this actually is in a
Of
budget
course.
in a budget standpoint, it actually most affects the first selectman. So at this point of the budget cycle, departments are compiling their budgets, And the first selectman is sending out a memo to department heads that they want to meet with them to review their anticipated spending for the next fiscal year. And that they want the department heads to get them their final request. We usually do the third Friday in December. So the Board of Finance isn't even kind of involved yet in the budget process. It's
Yeah.
more just planning the budget workshop meetings and schedule for December, January, and February.
But
And that's
one
what
of
the
the
board,
things-
board of, go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, Noreen.
I was gonna say I was just gonna say, that's for the Board of Selectmen too, Lauren, correct? I
Yeah.
don't remember getting a budget in December ever.
But I
No,
think we
it's-
need to exclude the Board of Ed, because that is something that is really much deeper in the weeds, and it is they don't,
Okay.
you know what I mean? So I think exclusive of the Board of Education, because I think that has to continue to roll.
So
Because they have a
Well, we want
finance
them to let
committee
us-
and everything else, you know
one
what
of
I'm saying?
my concerns would be that if you're the Board of Finance chair and you and 4 of your compatriots just got ousted, 3 of your compatriots just got ousted, you can call special meetings, spend, reallocate the budget, shove money into you have full spending power in the town, and you were just voted out. And so there is I and even for being a selectman, I mean, it's not the world's biggest lift if you're elected onto one of these boards that meets at night to come and show up. You know, that's not the worst. The first selectman is really the issue because the transition's too tight. You know, so I don't know. I'm not. I can see where there could be an issue. You've left an awful lot of power in a group that's reasonably powerful and somewhat unaccountable to each other. I mean, maybe we'll fix that later.
On the other side of it, that if there's a new first selectman, the same could be done.
Yeah, it's harder without unless we want to put in a provision that says, you know, other than regular business and emergency authority between, you know, election day and that we're anticipating no further spending, you know, commitments, obligations of the town.
That helps.
I like that idea.
But once again, I think we have to leave Board of Ed out of that. I think this has to be exclusive of Board of Ed.
Well, you know what? I'm wondering if this isn't a reasonable point to kind of put a pin in it, and then you know, maybe we can ask some of the board chairs, the current board chairs, what they think. Because I mean, you know, both, you know, it's BOE, BOF, and BOS, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I can't imagine. I don't know that there's a whole lot of ruckus that can happen with ZBA or Board of Assessment Appeals. I suppose we could have an unusual assessment, but I think it's really those 3 groups. By the way, not that you really expect an outgoing group to have an issue, but the charter should, you know, consider all kinds of.
Well, the other thing you have to consider are the registrars. They take their next leave in January, so no, you don't have to consider them. They get elected in November, and then January is when they have their new term.
Yeah.
So somewhere along the way, that's our current way of doing things. So we're not going with the charter when it comes to registrars, unless that's in a different area.
I believe that's state statute, and so it supersedes us.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Well, I
So
mean, the
we'll come
first
back to
selectman
this
is
one.
clearly. I mean, the real. Let's sort of back it up for a second. The reason to adjust the first selectman's position is because it means that only certain categories of people can run to be first selectman. There are only certain people that don't have a regular job that can say, "I'll run for this thing," and you're right, I'll quit on 3 days' notice, and I'll be taking up a full-time job the following Tuesday. You know, so that concern for me doesn't apply to any other seat because they're largely volunteer. You're elected; it's a volunteer position. You show up, and frankly, if you can't make the first meeting, nothing really bad happens. You know, you might feel a little silly, but big deal. So you show up in 2 weeks later.
The other thing,
wheels
the other
spin.
thing we could do is say that the, you know, unless an incumbent, the elected first selectman, participates, but as an observer and as much as they can. So, you know what I'm saying? So there are some people going into it saying, listen, if I win, I'm going to be out of here. So they plan for that. They plan for the win, so to speak, and have that backup capability. Then there's others, like you said, who, you know, they're winning and now they're going to say, oh, by the way, I'm gone. So, you know, I'd love to be able to see a transition time with the incumbent first selectman and the new first selectman, if there is one, to assist in the transition.
Yeah.
I might
It seems
just
like a
mention, Joe, that
no-brainer to me.
Bob, then Noreen. I'm sorry, Bob.
No, just to me, it seems to me like a no-brainer for the newly elected individual to take some time and
Right.
learn and talk with some people and cool down after the election, rather than the next week start.
Go ahead, Noreen.
may I just add that I agree with Bob. We have our state, our elections in November. You're in office till the following first week in January. Joan just said our registrars are like that. Maybe we should conform and make everyone the same, unless we hear from the Board of Ed that this would cause a hardship.
All right. So why don't we?
I think we may hear from the Board of Ed on that. So anyway.
I think you'd hear from staff too about the January date, again, just going back to the budget process, because the first selectman leads the staff budget the internal budget process with staff in the middle of December. So if you had a first selectman giving you directive for the middle of December and their priorities were one thing, and then 2 weeks later, you had a new first selectman with different priorities and you had to redo your department budget, that I think would be a burden on staff.
You know, I remember when Dave Klein came in for Kay Griffith. And I think, Joe, I think you're a brand new selectman. And he came in just at budget season and he presented Kay's budget to us. It was her budget. He wasn't changing it, but he presented it. That transition happened very smoothly. I think that happens quite often.
You know,
well, but
ahead,
but I think there's so many variations of, you know, you have to start your budget process and the workshops right in January. And if there hasn't been, I mean, I like the December versus the January if we're going to do a split for that piece, because then that does allow, you know, you're not, you know, especially under the current scenario where it's 2 years, you don't really have budget for the first year and you have to live with the budgets that somebody else's priorities that may be very, very different than your priorities. I think superintendent is a little different. There's not a lot of wiggle room. I don't think as much with the Board of Ed as there is with the priorities of a town, with all of the departments within the town.
So I have two suggestions thinking about this. One is, instead of December 1st, why isn't our start date the first Monday after Thanksgiving? Because that if I sort of think about it, that means it's always 2 weeks, you know, but it could start it a little earlier. And since Thanksgiving is a Zippo week, it kind of removes 1 week of business. You know, the week, what can be a full week following would be 1 more week that the town would be running with you know, uncertain management. And then my second thought was, and I think, Joan, this was, I can't remember whose idea it was. I think it's yours, that we should at the very least put the first selectman, the newly elected first selectman. I'm actually thinking not so much as an observer, just put them as a selectman at the table. And that there's an extra voting voice right there. It dilutes the incumbent's power for a little bit, and make it clear in the charter that should the incumbent decline to serve or resign, then the first selectman takes over and can appoint an acting first. And then we just do our best. What do we think of that?
I think so. I think if all elected officials shall commence on the first Monday after Thanksgiving, we could also, yeah, you've only got two Board of Selectmen meetings. Yeah, I mean, and I don't even think there is a Board of Finance meeting in November. And if there is, so I think that helps in the transition.
Yeah.
But I think Board of Ed needs, and we can bring it out to them, but I think they continuously just continue to hit the ground running, and they've got to create their subcommittees and appoint a chair. There's so many things that have to happen prior to them getting through the budget cycle. I think it would be arduous for them to have to wait.
Yeah, so two reactions. One, Joe, I like your idea that they come in as another member, but they don't fully take over, because the risk of the incumbents spending money is real, right? So I think that that's a good way to mitigate that risk. But and the second point too is, why can't we divide it? We don't even have to look at the Board of Education for this. Could just be the Board of Selectmen.
Or conceivably, we could just have everybody start as they do anyway, and just have the first selectman start. The first selectman becomes a selectman immediately, and the board is temporarily large, and then they become first selectman on the first Monday following Thanksgiving. So there's a built-in, everyone just comes in like they always have, which I don't know that that's a problem for a regular member. At least I've never heard that. But then the first selectman immediately becomes a selectman. So in some respects, the board becomes diluted a little bit and is sworn in formally 2 weeks later. That, to my mind, accomplishes the concern that I think Peggy raised in our public hearing, which is hey, how are you going to do this? And remember, some of her current concerns were very pragmatic, which was health insurance. Like, you have to sign up, it's like stuff, but yet kind of keeps the structure, keeps everything going.
I mean, I'd be open to whatever, all the different suggestions we come up with, but I do feel we have to take Peggy's comments. I think they were well taken. And we want to be able to open that seat to a lot of people. And we saw what she went through. And then I think she's pretty typical that way.
Yeah.
So I think we should at least take action on that one seat, if anything.
Yeah, I like that approach, Joe, from somebody who sat on the Board of Selectmen. I mean, I went into it completely blind and, went to a couple of meetings before being elected. But I had a really good Board of Selectmen that helped me learn. And then we were thrown right into the budget. So it's somebody sitting next to me going, oh, don't worry about that. So.
Yeah, but by the way, it does go without saying we're planning for hostility, but my experience has been, frankly, it's always really good. I showed up on 3 separate boards and everybody was really nice. It worked out fine. So yeah, so the concept being that we put them in as is, but the first selectman becomes a selectman immediately. So we would have to change the Board of Selectmen position. It shall have 5 positions except for the period of time.
For this,
Yeah. That there'd be a 6th, and then we'd have to make clear when they take over. And you know what? This may be something we should probably run, both by Peggy, but by Fillmore and Tom and Al, some of the people that have held the seat, in recent times. But I think we need to do that. Otherwise, we're going to end up with people that can do that, which tend to be retired folk. So let's think
And
about
the other
that.
thing too would be to check with Ira and see if it's even legal to do it this way.
Yeah.
I seem to recall. I think we in our last, was at the meeting, maybe it was the first time he came, and one of them I know we talked a little bit about this, but not in that detail. Okay, where to next? So if, by the way, I would encourage everybody, if you start thinking it through and suddenly get a better idea for next time we're together on it, like, go ahead. Go ahead, Bob. Did you put your hand up?
No, this is just the phrase elector of the town. That means somebody who registered to vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Period.
Yeah. Sorry
Okay.
to think about it. As distinguished, right? I like how we all pause. Like, which one is it? Yes.
No, so if you're registered to vote, you're an elector of the town.
Yes.
Yes. Because in order to be registered to vote, you have to be a full-time resident. Otherwise, the state won't let you register to vote here.
And not be registered to vote anywhere else.
Correct.
Right.
Okay. We are at annual budget referendum. How about if we just don't have one?
I was just gonna say that.
Not all towns do.
Is that true? What's
Yeah,
the other
no.
option?
They have a meeting and they vote and the Board of Selectmen votes, and after hearing and the Board of Finance votes, and they pass.
Or if they have a council form of government, the council votes on the budget.
Yep.
Even with the form of government we have, this is quite interesting. I was not here then, but we bought the surf club or Garvin Point without a referendum. It was so overwhelmingly wanted by the community. They passed it in just a town meeting and did not vote to go to referendum.
Wow.
That's a big purchase that they did. That came up the day that we voted to buy him and as a school. The former selectman, LaChance got up and told his story, and I found that remarkable. The town was knew enough that was that important back then.
Yeah, that was Jack Davis pushing Garvin Point.
So if I could from the top of the language, the referendum will be town budget, including Board of Education budget, shall be held no later than the 25th of May and by use of voting machines.
Mhm.
By use of voting machines.
Yep,
Is
it
there-
means that,
Like this, is that by any chance limiting if we're go into different modes of voting in the next decade? Like it's an undefined term. I'm uncertain as to why we say by use of voting machines versus consistent with state statute. Or am I just being
Well,
overly concerned?
so, I think the point of that originally, and I remember we kind of went into this the last time around, was it needs, if you're going to have a referendum vote, it's got to be a valid vote for, this is, once again, this is a referendum versus an annual budget town meeting. And you could do it as an annual budget town meeting. And so when they said it's going to be a referendum, that it's going to be a voting machine and ballots and that, versus a town meeting, we've had different ways of counting the votes.
Well, could you have a referendum without voting?
No.
So I guess I have no problem with the way I just don't want to have a distinction, just like the newspaper, which I know isn't state statute, but that suddenly we're all voting by iPhone 5 years from now. And instead we, except if you're in Madison, you have to come and fill out a card.
My other thing is, this is the very last possible date that needs for the tax collector. Should we try to up this date? It's a very prolonged period, the budget cycle, and I think we could try to squeeze, and we can put a pin in that one, but I think we could try to squeeze that to consolidate it, maybe even in April. There's a lot of towns that have passed budgets already for the next year.
I think that's a great idea. Look, Guilford did this, 2 weeks ago.
Well-
I think we're pretty late.
Well, but if I could, I sort of like the idea that the charter gives the last possible date, and it's up to the elected leaders to figure out when they're going to actually call the thing. Because what I wouldn't want to do is say, May 10th, and because of a million reasons the budget fails, which we've had.
Right.
This is an area where I think we want maximum flexibility to accommodate whatever happens. I go back to my story. I know I've told it before, where because the state came unglued many years ago, we had to artificially increase the budget by almost $1 million because we didn't know what else to do to pass it, and we were limited by this provision.
And we've continued to do that. I mean, the Board of Finance today puts the budget together with assuming there'll be no money coming from the state.
Yeah, that happened from that point in
They've been
time.
doing that for about 5 years now.
Right, and Board of Ed's been doing it longer than that, so.
Well,
um,
that Board of Ed money is in the town side. I mean, I'm really talking about the ECS because that's the big dollars.
Yeah.
So
but that-
Or it was, it used to be.
I just feel like it is the drop dead date for the tax collector, and I think that unfortunately, a lot of times we push that like almost to the max, and I think, I think we need to try to encourage it to be as early as possible, and I think that just allows for better planning.
But
So-
I guess
Joan, was that something? I just wanted to ask Joan, was that something
Yeah.
that came out with the last charter review to change that date? You remember?
It was, oh God, and I'm trying to remember now, but I remember the discussion happening with Alma saying it really does get us to the last possible time frame. I don't know if we ever made an actual change or kind of encouraged. Let me see if I can bring up my old version. It's around somewhere.
And where did the 25th of May come from? I mean, does anybody know? Is there some reason we have to, even if we gave 10 days less, wouldn't that help the tax collector get her bills out and not be?
Yeah,
concerned?
it is literally the drop dead date for the tax collector.
Yeah, because when it's held on the 25th, then the mill rate isn't calculated until the next day. And then she has just enough time to print the tax bills, stuff the envelopes, and get them in the mail.
Right.
Because they have to be mailed by June 1st.
The part,
do something.
the part
And-
I can't get around though is that this doesn't say that we have to do it on the 25th. It says no later than the
Just
25th.
no later then. Yeah.
right.
I mean, I guess if we want to, maybe we make it 2 weeks before, 1 week before this. But still, I do like the idea that there's flexibility. Whenever, the board of selectmen want to set the date.
Yeah, I'm really in a different place on this one. I'm in favor of, if anything, of zotzing the date and let them deal with it. If they blow the date and they don't get the tax bills out, then the town's going to look pretty stupid, and they're not going to be a selectman anymore.
But I want to bring up a thing that the superintendent said. By having it so late and not having a confirmed budget, we're 2 weeks behind now, Guilford, in our hiring process.
And I agree, and I think First
Yeah.
Selectman Walker will do a wonderful job correcting that.
That's not happening.
I just don't think that that's an issue that for the chart. Having been part of some budgets where things happen. We had, oh good gracious, we had 2 budgets fail, I think. And Guilford, I think they had 4 fail one year. I wouldn't want to be in the position of messing around because of an artificial date within my own charter when you're trying to pass a budget. When things are bad, things are bad.
Yeah, but when they fail in the middle of May, then the next one isn't until June. And if that fails, then you're in July and you're not able to do any capital improvements for a year. And that's happened as well. So if we pushed it earlier and it feels there may be time enough to recoup, have another budget referendum and still get the tax, bills printed and done.
But from the standpoint of the Board of Selectmen, that. Everybody knows that. So you try and hold them a little earlier. Well, I mean, that's actually that's a question I don't know the answer to. Lauren, do we know when these have actually been held? Like, do we have a list of what date these things have been held on?
Off the top of my head, they are.
I assume you know everything off the top of your head.
Yes.
Yes.
They're generally 1 week prior to this. So they're generally, like this year, it's the 18th. Last year, it was the 19th. The year before, I want to say it was the 16th. So they're about a week in advance of this drop dead date.
So what if we were to include language that says there's an expectation it'll be held on the no later than the first Tuesday of May. However, an expectation of it being held on the first Tuesday of May, if not earlier, but in no event later than May 25th. You know, giving guidance, but not a straitjacket. I feel very half-a-loafy saying something like that, but it.
I like
mean,
that.
it doesn't, I like the guidance, and maybe it's, you know, the last week of April, and then, but no later than the 25th of May. I mean, I feel like our budget process is the total consumption for months upon months, and it's a 1-year budget. It just, to me, is very inefficient. I'm getting off the soapbox.
I guess I like the idea of having a window, maybe a start date or, and you know, the drop dead date. But again, you know, we're looking, I mean, by what we're saying here is that we're looking to the charter to dictate when that date's going to be, that the actual, you know, date that the election's going to, or the referendum's going to happen, which I prefer to have a minimalist and approach and flexibility, as opposed to using this, because obviously if we're putting the date of the 25th down, people have been doing it a week beforehand. You know, as Joe's saying, you know, the selectmen should know that.
Yeah.
They should know that they need more time.
Well, I think one good reason to give guidance earlier is because, is this right? I think everyone other than Al has been a selectman in sunny days. You know, like when it rains, it rains. You know, when there's a big economic contraction, budgets fail, and you know, you have to adjust differently. So giving guidance earlier, I don't think is a bad thing.
No,
You know,
I remember being on low cap when the budget went down.
Yeah.
And you know, I remember Jean saying, I'm going to write a letter to the editor saying, you realize that we can't do any capital improvement programs, even though you passed the Board of Ed budget. The town budget is low cap's part of the town budget. So,
well, and frankly, that experience is what led to the capital improvement plan. You know, at least that experience and the others at low cap. Okay.
I have to be asked, was that the year the town budget went down because of the salt shed? Because there's always such major issues. You see, as I recall, moving the salt shed over on Cops Road was the issue of the day. There were signs up, but I just couldn't let that go by without mentioning it.
I think if I recall correctly, I think the entire town budget was increasing something like 4.1%. You know, or 4.5. There was some number, and you're right. The salt shed was part of it, because clearly that was the thing that has lasting impact over the last 15 years.
I think it was the year we brought a town planner in too. I think we started.
That was it. But it was also a time when budgets were failing up and down the shoreline. Okay. So let's see. You know, Lauren, if you could flag that, and let's see how that reads next time. See if we still like the idea.
Okay.
Anything else in this section?
So going to the next paragraph, again, the suggestion to mandate that the budget posting has to be also on the website, not just in the newspaper. And then also the printing of the budget twice. So this kind of goes back to this change that we just tentatively made in the first paragraph. If we are expecting that the referendum be held earlier, one of the things that will help us accomplish that from a staff timing level will be to only require that the budget be printed in the source once. Because it has to be in the source, it has to be on 2 different Thursdays, their week in between, and that does impact when we can hold the referendum, because we have to post the final approved budget that gets approved after the second public hearing in the newspaper twice, and then that has to be in at least 10 days before the referendum date.
I don't see a need for publishing it twice if it's on the website, and as long as the source gets the date right.
This morning was a really great morning at Town Canvas, let me tell you.
Oh, I didn't even notice.
Yeah,
hey, so it looks like
I got a lot of circles.
It looks like we're going to lose some of our members at 6:15. So why don't we wrap this issue and then spend a little bit of time talking about the next time we're meeting, and then we'll reconvene. Yeah, I do we have to publish? Not to ask, do we have to publish the whole budget in the paper? I mean, nobody reads it. It's incredibly small and it's dumb. So
I don't think
the
we
website-
published in the paper. I don't think we do the detail we used to do. Correct, Lauren? I think we're able to minimize them because some of these, city budgets were amazing, but but we were required to post it. I know. I just don't know to what extent the detail were, if it's still as bad as it used to be.
the last
It's
one I
several
remember looking
pages.
at. Yeah, last one I remember looking at looked like the budget to me, and in tiny, teeny scribble.
Yeah, they
It's-
made some changes more for cities, I guess. So maybe it didn't impact us at all, but believe me, we've been trying to get it out of the paper, but
It's
Why
Everybody's
don't
slightly
we
not
need to
better.
do
online.
2 weeks though? Do we have to do 2 weeks by law?
Well, hold on, Lauren.
Yeah.
What was it? What was it you were going to say?
No, I was just saying the new budget printing is slightly better than it used to be, and it is even better this year with the new accounting software that we upgraded to at the beginning of the calendar year. So I just
Do-
caution.
Go ahead.
I'm just saying, I just caution taking it out of the newspaper at all, since we do still have some members of the public that are not technology savvy and do not go online.
Well, could I propose
Lauren,
that?
I think we're required to put it on the paper still. I believe it's still state law.
So maybe we could check. We could check that because, for instance, I wouldn't necessarily object to printing a budget summary. I think I think more people would read it if if we had the top level income statement, kind of thing, and major expenses, including any proposed major capital expenditures, like that kind of thing. Would be, I think, a little more rational, because I find the communication effort to be not helpful. What's really helpful is to know, hey, it's budget time. Go check that link thing. So maybe for next time, Lauren, we could figure out what we have to do.
Yep.
And and maybe Stacy for the budgets used to always have a quick top sheet that
Yep.
showed the budgets and the changes year over year with some points. I would almost rather give the public that. Like, that probably tells the story. Otherwise, everyone's Hercule Poirot. They have to suss it out. And unless they go to the meetings, it's almost misleading by
Well,
being over-informed.
The first page is that summary. It really is. It says 2019, 2020, 2021, 20. So it does kind of give you the look of what you were actual revenues, actual expenditures, approved, estimated budget, that kind of stuff. And then there is detail. I'm looking at it now.
Yeah. So I mean, my
And
feeling
then
is
capital improvement.
So
There used to be a page that Joe's talking about that, you looked at what the increase was, and this page spelt out what was in those increases. Not the whole budget, just what was in the significant increase or significantly into the increases.
so
i.e. health benefit or something, anything.
yeah. So if I could, since we're about to lose a couple of people, our next charter review is, I believe, the 18th. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. So we're back on our Tuesday schedule. One thing I'd like to talk about. So I'd like to, unless I'm hearing a voice otherwise, I'd like to continue this process for a while we continue to slog through. But we should probably leave some time to talk about how we want to, if we want to consider breaking up into some subgroups, or if we want to do the workflow a little differently. But for me right now, this is very helpful to have us all together to talk through the budget from the top to the bottom. But I recognize that there may be other ways to do it. So I'd like to open it up for discussion then.
I like this way.
So do I. Yeah.
I do too.
I
Me
mean,
too.
I'm having fun, but I'm odd. So
Well, we're all a little odd then.
yeah, it's true. We're the Charter Review Commission. All right. In that case, since no, you guys need to go, is there any other, do we have any comments or questions from the public?
No one is raising their hand.
Excellent. In that case, then why don't we adjourn, and I'll see everyone in 2 weeks or a little
Stay
less.
safe, everybody.
Thanks,
See ya.
For 2
everybody.
weeks, thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Okay.
Thanks. This
Bye.
was really good.